Hey everybody, it's Christy with Team Podcast, and I wanted to come to you today because I've seen a little bit of a trend with some of my clients lately, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I think you can probably relate and there's probably a better solution for you. So I wanted to talk to you about the sponsorship thing with your podcast. Everybody seems to be starting a podcast, and the more people I talk to, the more I get, oh yeah, I would love to eventually get a sponsor for my podcast. And that seems great. It seems like great for you to be able to do your podcast and have people sending you money and you get a check and you go on and enjoy your life. And now your podcast is monetized. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. And it's funny because when I talk to new clients, a lot of times I ask them, what is your goal? Is your goal monetization? Are you trying to build your email list? Is it a funnel for something? What are you doing? And many times people will say, oh, and I have a passion for it. I'd love to make some money for it, but I don't really know what I would sell. And I don't really want to sell something because we somehow feel like if we sell something to our listeners that we're sort of devaluing the philanthropic part of what we're trying to do. And the actuality of it is that if you have sponsorships, you actually have to sell harder than you would if you were selling your own products and services through your podcast. Because those sponsors, if they're spending, let's just say they're spending $100 to advertise with you. You know what? They're looking to make $200 from that advertisement that they spent $100 with you for. So if they're not making more from your podcast than you are making from the advertisement, you're going to have churn. And every single time you turn around, you're going to have to be finding new sponsors. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is sort of a couple of case studies. And these are some examples of clients that I had. And I think people hold up this sponsorship thing as like, oh, it's going to be great money. I know Joe Rogan makes millions of dollars every single year. Tim Ferriss makes huge money. You name all these other shows, and they make great money from podcasts, advertisers. And that's true. They do make good money. But you also have to realize they have millions of downloads every single month. Now, the average download, people are getting for just independent, normal podcasters, it's not even 10,000 a month. It's more like 3,000 a month. And that's total downloads. And depending on your archive, how long you've been podcasting, how many shows you have in the can, a lot of your catalog and your downloads every single month could be coming from your back catalog. So advertisers that are joining you today really don't care what you're getting per month. They want to know when you release a show, how many downloads do you get within 30 days? Now, when you start looking at that, you will probably honestly want to cry because it's a small amount. And what happens is they say for every 1,000 downloads that you get in the 30-ish days after publishing, they will give you a set dollar amount. Right now, there's some people that might get as much as $40 for those 1,000 downloads, but there's average is probably more like $23 to $25 per 1,000 downloads. And if you're going with something like, if you're using like an Anchor or Spreaker or something like that for podcast monetization, you're actually getting pennies on the dollar for those advertisements. So you might get 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 downloads per month and get like $6 because they're paying you 22 cents per download or something, ridiculous. So I wanted to tell you a couple of stories. I've worked with clients for years. I have a full service podcast production company. And a little while ago, I don't want to say obsessed, but I became very, very concerned because of some of the things that I'm seeing with my longtime podcasters. And I have some people that have been very consistent. I'm talking steady Eddie publishing every single week for the last 3 or 4 years. Like they've never missed an episode. They're always putting shows out there. They're giving value to their audience. And it hit me one day. I was talking to one of my clients and I realized in a very sobering way that I was making more money from their podcast than they were as their podcast producer, as their people that were handling the full service post-production of their podcast, I was making more money than they were from their podcast. And I don't know about you, but that really bothers me. I don't want to be a cost for people. I want their podcast to be a profit center. So I want to be part of the revenue production. And there's a lot of people that just aren't set up for that. But I have a client who gets about 100,000, maybe 105,000 downloads every single month. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's maybe 98,000 downloads per month. And this client has been podcasting steady, every single week for, I would say, at least 3.5 years now. So, and the podcasts are deep dives into deep topics. Every show is probably a minimum of an hour. And he gets over 100,000 downloads every single month on his podcast. So I was talking to him, and he was doing a consultation with me, and we were talking about the podcast, and he said, my growth is stagnated, and I want to get to a point where I'm getting 200,000 downloads per month. And my question to him was, why do you want 200,000 downloads a month? And he said, well, because then I would make twice the amount of money from the sponsors that I have. And I said, well, do you feel like your sponsors are paying you what your audience is worth right now? And he said, well, no, I don't. And I said, so you're going to go to the trouble to get go to the trouble to get twice the audience. So in 3 years, you've gotten from 0 to 100,000. And now you're going to want to go to 100,000 to 200,000, and you're hoping that somehow you'll feel better about getting paid. Like, if you don't feel like you're getting paid what you're worth for 100,000 downloads a month, why would getting 200,000 a month make you feel any better? Because maybe now it gives you a bigger amount of money, but you're still going to feel like you're sort of getting shortchanged by the advertisers. And here's the other thing about the advertisers. They're never the same. He uses a podcast, agency to get his ads, and that's completely legitimate. They go out and get the ads and find the advertisers, and they need shows to put them on. So it's a win-win, but he only gets about 50%, no, about 30, sorry, he gets about 80%, maybe 70 to 80% of whatever the ad revenue is from that show, from the advertising contract. And the ad agency gets the rest, and they carry on, but they don't have to sign on for a long amount of time. Like, they might sign on for 1 month. They might sign on for 2 months. And during that time, every dollar that those ad agencies, or actually that the client is paying money to be advertised on their show, they're looking at conversion rates, and they're looking at trackable things. So this guy would just really do a bang-up job of being creative and coming up with some really good ads. It wasn't just like a normal ad read. He would do things that made you feel like, it was a lot of effort on his part to advertise these different advertisers. And when it's all said and done, he's not getting what he's worth from the advertisers. And I was even talking to him about his email list, because his email list has grown from 0 to over 10,000 in the last 3.5 years just from his podcast. And honestly, if you're into marketing at all, and if you really did marketing, especially email marketing, poorly, you would think that every email list, every person on your email list, I'm not going to say this correctly, every person that's on your list is worth at least $1 a month. And that's if you're doing a terrible job. There are many people that do email marketing, and each person on their list is worth $20 or $30 or $40 a month. So you have to think about that and go, okay, he's got an email list of 10,000. And I asked him what he's making from that, and he's not really making anything. He's got this whole archive of 3.5 years worth of weekly shows he hasn't monetized. Doesn't know how to monetize. So I talked to him some about it, and he's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Now I now need to find the time to go create all this content and monetize and do all this stuff. And I'm like, it's still, you're not getting the point here. The point is, if we had been working with you to get certain things into place, where every single quarter you're putting out a new evergreen offer and sales funnel that you're building for your podcast and for your own programs and for your own courses and for your own things, then you would have this evergreen funnel that would have, you would have multiple of them. Like, if he's been podcasting 3.5 years, and even if we did one a quarter, he would have at least like 12 or more funnels. If each one of those funnels is only making him $100 a day, each one of those funnels brings in a total of $1,200. The combined total of the funnels would bring in $1,200 a day. Most people can deal with that, right? That's pretty darn good money. Put them up over, $35,000 a month. So it really bothered me that he's not thinking about this from a marketing perspective. He's thinking about it from an advertising perspective. Now, let me also tell you this. The reality of getting sponsorships means that you're going to be putting somebody new in front of your audience every single week, or maybe every month if you get sponsors for every single month. And I have a client who has worked again diligently, and she pours her heart and her soul into her podcast. And her podcast is one of those that's about a very emotionally charged issue, and a very a certain segment of the population that have been through this type of trauma, and they're really banded together, and they're working from an advocacy perspective, and they're trying to really put things into place, grassroots efforts to really get the word out to try to help people that are dealing with this particular issue. And she's been doing it for almost 4 years now, weekly, putting out a show. And she contacted me probably about 6 months ago, and she's like, all right, I'm really buckling down. I'm going to try to find some sponsors. And this is a person who is not at all salesy, like not the least bit salesy at all. So if she tries to sell you something of hers, or if she tries to sell you something of an advertiser's, it's not going to sound like a sales pitch because she's not salesy. It's going to be kind of matter of fact. It's going to be read, and it's going to be, I'm going to go through the motions of reading what I'm supposed to read, and here's my ad copy, and check them out and move on. And she said, I've got this sponsor, and they want to sponsor a show, or they want to sponsor one show a month for the next 6 months. And this client gets about 12,000 downloads a month on total on her podcast. So when you look at it, she might be getting 1,500 to 2,000 downloads per episode, which is that CPM number that everyone wants to look at. And what's happening is that sponsor says, I want to go one show a month for the next 6 months, and I'll pay you $150. Now, granted, she's paying me way more than that to produce her show every single month. So it's really disappointing to see that that's the return that you get. And most people don't get, even if you had 8,000 downloads per episode, which would be that's kind of what the guy in 1,000 that was getting 100,000 a month, he was getting about 8,000 downloads per episode every single month within 30 days of releasing a show. And if you work out the CPM, 8,000 downloads per episode in the first 30 days after publishing at $25 CPM is $200. $200. That's all you get. And you're going to have really more than one sponsor at that rate in order to even get your money's worth out of it, in order for it to even be worth your time and the effort you're putting into creating this content. So this is frustrating for me, and there's so much of a better way, and I feel like we've been doing it. I don't want to say we've been doing it wrong in podcasting, but I'm to the point where I'm about ready to say we've been doing it wrong. We've been telling people for years now, just create the content, put it out there, build the community. And like this guy that was getting 100,000 downloads a month, he is wanting to double his downloads so he can make more money with sponsorships. And the amount of effort and what he was trying to do, and it's funny because whenever we think about, and I hear it, oh man, I get so frustrated when I hear it all the time. I see it in the podcasting groups. There was a guy the other day that was like, okay, I'm putting out one show a week, and I'm getting about 3,000 downloads a month. And if I'm thinking about it, and if I go to 3 episodes a week, that would be, and you just did the math, right? 3 episodes a week, 12 episodes a month times 3,000. By the end of the year, I think I could be 35,000 downloads per month. And then I could get sponsors. And the whole thing is, all you're doing when you add more, he's adding more free content, so he's adding more work to himself. So you think by putting out more content, he's going to double and triple the amount of money he makes. But all he's doing is diluting the per episode numbers that those sponsors want to see. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I've had many, many, many shows go from weekly for years to suddenly they're doing twice a month. And you know what? In every single situation, their download numbers total have been about the same. So what does that mean? That basically means they're getting the same number of total downloads every single month with half of the shows, which is really just great for, trying to get sponsorships, because you're driving up the CPM, the per episode download number that those advertisers want to see. But it's frustrating to me because everyone has this myth of like, oh, I'm getting 1,000 downloads per now. What can when should I start seeking out sponsorships? And it's like, well, when do you feel like it's the right thing to do to take $25 from a sponsor to go in front of your audience and have you pitch your butt off, basically, for their product that you may or may not agree with, like, or even believe in? You may even never have tried it. And you're going to bring that in front of your audience and ask them to trust you because you spent 3 years building rapport? It doesn't make any sense. And it's frustrating for podcasters. There's a sort of a myth out there that once you have sponsorships, like, it's game over. You're set and you can make money. And honestly, I've worked with literally hundreds of podcasters over the last 5 years, and there's only one, just one out of all of them, that have built a business around their podcast. When I say that, I'm talking about they only do podcast sponsorships, and because of the nature of their show, they make a lot of money doing podcast sponsorships. They make a couple $100,000 a year. But what they're doing is the John Lee Dumas model of a daily show, and it took them a really long time to get to that level. So it's really, really important for you to understand that as a podcaster, podcast monetization is not going to be solved by getting sponsorships. There's a better way to do it. Right now I'm working with several clients. I'm convinced that building some really cool offers that your listeners can have and that you can pitch to your audience all the time, and you can have these sort of evergreen things running and campaigns running all the time that'll continue to bring in money. And then what happens is you just use your podcast to drive traffic to those campaigns. By doing that, you essentially stop focusing on downloads, because really, honestly, don't mean to offend anybody, but downloads are a vanity metric. I can prove it to you. I'll talk to you about it in the next episode, because downloads are something that mean absolutely nothing whenever it's related to how much money or how successful your podcast is. So keep focusing on the metrics that are important, which is not downloads, but the revenue and the email subscribers that you're getting from your podcast. So if you're interested, I'm working with a group right now of doing kind of our beta test for our program. It's called Downloads to Dollars. And it's really going to be, I think, life-changing for some of these podcasters, because it's what they have been looking for, but really didn't know how to sort of put the framework to it and really didn't know how to carry it out. So we kind of handle all the technical pieces of it. They handle the content piece. We handle everything else. And together we build something that is sort of like a money-making machine for their podcast. So if you're interested in getting on the waiting list to get information about that, it's kind of a limited thing that we're doing, limited seats available, because I can't work with everyone. But just go to teampodcast.com/ the letter D, the number 2, D, downloads to dollars, D to D, and you'll see where you can sign up there to get on the waiting list. We'll be talking about this more because I'm all about hopefully getting fewer and fewer podcasters that I'm making more off their podcasts than they are. I don't like that. I don't like that being in that position at all. So if you're interested in doing that, come join us, teampodcast.com/ D, the number 2, and the letter D, downloads to dollars. And we'll be hearing more success stories from that as it goes, because it's really going to be earth-changing and life-changing for some of these podcasters. So earth-shattering, I guess I should say. Earth-changing. Sounds like an earthquake or something, but it's going to be earth-shattering for some of these podcasters that have just really done the time, and they've put in the grind, and they've built their value. So come join us. We'll see you there, and we'll talk again very soon. I hope you have a fantastic day.